didn't say it's a new podcast episode. I said that I sat down with a friend and asked him these questions, which is very valuable, and said, what if I recorded it? Like if you're a fly on the wall in that situation, like imagine if it's $50,000 for a day to hang out with this guy and I sat down with him and recorded my day with him. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to have all those different people comment below yes.
This Audience Summit is brought to you in partnership with Podcast Notes, the best ideas from the world's best podcasts in minutes. Hey, Nick, welcome to the Grow Your Podcast Audience Summit brought to you by the Lewis and Kyle Show. We're really excited to have you as a contributor, so thank you so much for being here.
Of course, man. I appreciate you putting this together. We were just talking about how I wasn't educated in something in 2015, and because of that, I had tons of trials. So I think it's cool that you're putting out education for people in a condensed format so that they cannot fail for years. Usually it takes about 5 years to learn something new yourself, and it takes about 5 minutes to learn that same thing from someone who's already done it and then take off to the next level from there. So I'm excited to create that experience together.
Yeah, that's definitely our goal, is to condense the learning process from 30 really exciting podcast hosts, what they've done, what they've learned, the successes and the failures, and you can just model that by watching this. But our first question for you before we get started, could you give us a bit of personal background on yourself and your show, the when and why you started, and kind of your mission?
Totally, man. I appreciate it. So I grew up in a broken family, and so success wasn't like evident for me. I didn't do well in school. Me and my dad had a falling out actually when I was around 12. My parents broke up when I was 4. And during that time, I gained 60 pounds. I graduated 1.8 GPA from high school. So I had no way to be able to go to college. But that's like the only thing in front of you at the time. I didn't want to go just get a regular job. So I remember like almost writing a note to a college thinking, man, I think I could persuade them that like I had a hard life and maybe I could get into a college, and then ended up not going after that. And I actually ended up going to about like 15 different countries serving the poor. And during that time, that's when I was like, man, there's so many people that want to go serve the poor. That's a heart thing. Like they have to love people and care about people, but it's not a skill thing. You know, it's not like they had to have this big skill set. So I thought, what if I went out and made money, used my skills to make money, and then I could send more people to go serve the poor. And then I realized coming back to America that actually there was poor people that just had a lot of money. They just had a poor mentality. They had, if you gave someone who was poor a little bit, all of a sudden they'd be super happy. You give Americans everything and they're still not freaking happy about anything. And so inside of that, I went out and started my business. I had lost 60 pounds and kept it off. So I thought I would just like go out and do that. And I failed through that process for 3 years. I never made more than $3,000 in a month until I started sharing my story. And that's where Russell Brunson and Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi quoted me, which has been quoted before, but they gave me credit in front of 280,000 people and said, Nicholas Bayerle talks about how your mess is your message. And he was able to do that. Take the failures of his past, overcome them. And then I started communicating it into our message. So what we do now is we help redefine what it means to be a businessman, change the dictionary definition where you cannot be a businessman without prospering health, wealth, and relationships. And our goal is to take that example from our community and our coaching clients and to consult every major world leader. And we do it through our online platforms. We do it through our coaching, do it through our live events. And we know we're successful when we create a three-dimensional businessman that's prospering health, wealth, and relationships, and they're helping inspire other people to do the same. So throughout that process, my wife had a dream actually. And in that dream, we had a podcast. And at the time I was friends with John Lee Dumas because we all lived in San Diego. And so I didn't want to have a podcast because I didn't want to just copy what he was doing. So when she had the dream about it, we were like, you know what? Like you had a dream that we had a podcast. That's pretty cool if we were to take action on that and create it. So John helped us. We launched in 2016 and we became #1 new podcast for 6 out of the 8 weeks. And out of all new podcasts, and we got as low as number 34 in the US. And I would say that one of the biggest things with that, and the reason why we created it, we didn't know at the time, we thought that this was something that was just going to blow up. And I realized soon after that it was super difficult just to be consistent. Yet 90% of podcasts quit after episode 7. And so because of that, we just continued to go with it. And now it's become this huge process, not just to generate leads, but actually to nurture the people in our audience already. So people consistently listen to us. And some of the awesome experts that have come on our show have said things like, if someone listens to you for an hour, they're willing to give you $1,000. It's like the rapport building process. So now we have hundreds and hundreds of episodes with millions plus of downloads and listens to be able to go out there and now create into those clients that we get to transform. So that's why we created it. That's how we created it. And I would say our launch strategy was something that made us really unique and it's what made us successful.
Well, thank you for sharing that whole concept with us. That's going to be really helpful for everyone to understand your answers to the following questions. So our first question for you, What has been the most effective marketing channel for growing your podcast audience? Like you said, you had a very successful launch. So how do you kind of describe the main channels you used for that to happen?
Yeah. So number one, for the people that are launching or relaunching or want to get a boost in their podcast, what we did is a podcast launch strategy. Because of the first 8 weeks, especially at the time, there's been ebbs and flows of this importance is that your podcast will be in the new and noteworthy. And so that's when I just like said, all right, this is time I'm going to push for this. So before we launched, we created a podcast launch team. This could be friends, family, twisting people's arm, people that say, hey, I'm committed that when you launch, or I'm committed over this certain period of time to subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast on any platform possible. Now, compensation drives behavior. So if people aren't compensated to do something, they're probably not going to do it. Like you see this in network marketing companies. People sell what they're told to sell or have bonuses for selling or make the most money selling. No one wants to sell the thing that doesn't make them any money. So they focus on things, car dealerships, whatever, the things that make them the most profit. So because of that, we created giveaways. So for this short amount of time, we had this podcast launch team before we even launched. And then when we launched, we had this reason to go live and share about it on Instagram or YouTube or whatever platform it is. Every social channel is free. So you might as well post on every single one of them, no matter what, whether you had the strategy or not. And inside of that, we had a way to say, hey guys, this week we're giving away Modern Day Businessman, or maybe I'd give away Lewis Howes' book, or I have a pocket guide to the US Constitution right here. Books were easy because I'd buy books from all my friends. And I'm like, man, I have all this freaking crap. Like I could give it away. You could partner with companies and say, hey, I'm going to promote you in front of my audience. Will you send product? I'm going to give it away. It's going to help me, but it's also going to help you. Because think about it. Product-based companies, if they have a supplement, we may buy it for $60, but they may make it for $6. So if they give you 3 pieces of product for $18 and you're promoting it in front of people and one person buys, they're happy with that. So I get all these products from people and I'd go live and I'd be like, hey guys, like today I'm giving away this book from Lewis Howes. I'm super excited. But if you haven't yet, subscribe, rate, review the podcast and share it. And once you do that and just show us, then you're going to enter to win the next time. So it was a shameless way to be able to promote the podcast through saying, hey, I'm giving this away. People would jump on to see if they won or see if they could win. And then through that, I'd show them how they could win it. The next grassroots strategy that we did right away was that we went through every new friend request, follower, everything that we had, and we used this script. Maybe they can clip this out and like write it down. I would say something like, hey, Kyle, what's up, man? Thank you for the friend request, or thank you for the follow. I really appreciate it. I'd love it if you could send me over a little bit more about yourself. A little bit about me is I have a podcast called BDB. We're actually trying to become #1 in new and noteworthy right now. I'm going to send you the link, dude. If you could subscribe, rate, review. Don't even have to share it yet. That'd be amazing. But again, I would love to hear more about yourself. Send me over more about what you do. Would love to get more connected. A sandwich of them, me, them, an action item, exact thing to do, something simple. And every single day I would take a walk and I would just hammer out every single friend request. Because again, it's different if I follow Kyle and say, hey, Kyle, can you do this? It's totally different if Kyle sends me a request or follows me. I'm like, hey, man, like you followed me. I'd love to learn more about you, but if you could do this. So, and also who wants to send over more about themselves if they won't even click subscribe, rate, review on a freaking podcast real quick? That'd be really weird if they're like, oh, I'm going to send them my stuff, but not theirs. They're like, oh, this is mutually beneficial. So that's at the very beginning. We did the podcast launch strategy. We pushed everyone to do the subscribes, rate, reviews. And inside of that got like 200 and something reviews, just like that. Became #1 ranked podcast, down to 34 in the nation in health, education, and business. So outside of that, I think one of the biggest things that people are lacking right now is the ability to market the podcast. So 1 is getting new listeners. 2 is getting the current listeners to listen. I think most people have their core, like every time I launch an episode, I get 100, 400, 4,000, 40,000 downloads every single month. Yet when they promote it, they promote these stupid looking, like it's me and Kyle and Lewis and we're like all together and like we have the same template with the same exact thing and we're just all on all 3 sides of the picture. And that's awesome. Yet those usually don't work well on social media. They're usually not favored in social media because there's too much text and too much going on. And it becomes so repetitive that no one even knows it's a new freaking episode. And just because it works for these famous people like Joe Rogan or something, having the crappiest freaking looking picture with the crappiest intro in the world doesn't mean it's going to work for us. So the way that I've been able to do that is by using the things that I've done to promote and sell things on social media using like the 3 core hooks. And in a regular post, there's only about 2. Number 1 is the first sentence that you use in social media. And the second one's either the picture or the video. So obviously a pattern interrupt or a hook in the video would be, how does it look? And then also doing something to grab someone's attention, like I just did with my book. So no matter, like, if I were to give my book away for free, I'd be like, hey guys, guess what? I have this book for free. I can't wait to give it to you guys. And people are like, what the frick's going on? Rather than just being normal. I'd also have something cool in the background. So that'd be my way to capture attention. One way to figure this out for yourself is to scroll through social and see what grabs your attention and then look at why. Second thing is they're going to look at the first line that you have that you write on social media. See, on Instagram, you're going to see the video first or the picture first, and then you're going to look at the first line. Same thing with Facebook, but it's more prominent to look at the actual text. So inside of that, I want to use a good hook. So an example of this that people can rip off and use for every episode as a template, and this just takes hard work, but this is really ninja. So I would say something like, I interviewed my friend Alex Hermosi. He went from 0 to $100 million in a few years, 0 to $50 million in 20 months. And I said, all right, how could I promote this podcast by not just saying, listen to Alex Hermosi, went from 0 to $50 million in blah, blah, blah months. Click here to be able to get it. Don't be lazy and put your freaking clickable link in the post. Don't be lazy and put it in the first comment on your post. Dude, stop being so freaking lazy and create a good hook and create a script. So here's the flow of it right now. I'm going to go on social media, these platforms, and I'm going to say, I just sat down with my friend who went from 0 to 50 million in 20 months. And we talked about the exact framework and strategy that he used for sales and marketing. Wouldn't it be cool to be a fly on the wall in a conversation like that, just to be able to sit in the room and take notes? Well, if I actually recorded that conversation, how many of you guys would want access to it for free? If you want it, drop yes below. I may have a surprise for you. And then a picture that grabs attention, maybe me and Alex, or, Alex is buff. So maybe just a picture with him and his shirt off would probably grab some attention. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to get 100, 200, 300 comments below saying yes, because I piqued curiosity. I didn't say it's a new podcast episode. I said that I sat down with a friend and asked him these questions, which is very valuable, and said, what if I recorded it? Like, if you were a fly on the wall in that situation. Like, imagine if it's $50,000 for a day to hang out with this guy, and I sat down with him and recorded my day with him. Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to have all those different people comment below yes. On every platform, every single platform, I could then say, hey, cool, let me send you this message directly. So I don't just comment below the freaking podcast episode. I legitimately write a script, send it to my assistant. My assistant personally messages every single one of those people with a call to action again. Hey, make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. Make sure to share it and tag us on social. And the key, dude, is I have them go message the person that was just on the episode. So my podcast gives them more responses than anyone else out there. That's a grassroots strategy that I believe everyone can start doing right now and see immediately different results. No matter if their audience is 100 people or 1,000 people, they're still going to get more response. And as long as the content is good, it's going to continue to grow organically.
Well, it's an extremely detailed and interesting answer. And I'm glad, like you said, that this is something we have recorded. Because
I went really
someone
quick,
can go to the beginning and watch it again.
I know our time is limited, but I also know that probably no one else is going to say that because they don't do it because they're lazy.
No, we're on, this is, I don't know the chronology of how I'm publishing them on the YouTube playlist or the podcast, but this is number 28 for us. And there was a lot of new material and a lot of new ideas, even after asking 27 hosts the exact same question. But our second question for you, what are some underrated tactics you've used to attract listeners to your show?
Well, that first one is definitely underrated, right? Like making those hooks, making those posts. I would say an underrated one though is doing the podcast launch strategy, or if you've already launched, going after building credibility again. So often people launch their show and think, oh, like it'll just kind of build organically if it's meant to build organically. I don't want to like push it. No, treat it like a business, meaning that no one knows how big your show is. No one knows how many downloads you get. What are the things that they can see about a show? They can see reviews. They can see responses. They can see people that have been on it before. So one of the things is to utilize, all right, how can I, with my current audience of people that will promote, because you think about, you have 3 different types of people that get on a podcast. You have C players, which is usually they get the benefit of getting on your show because they don't have an audience, but they have something cool to share. You have B players where it's mutually beneficial. They'll promote it. They'll post it up. And it's beneficial to you too, because they're good and they're promoting and they're getting a benefit from being on the show. Then you have the A players, the people that will never post it. They'll never look at it. They don't care. You get all the benefit for getting them. So to get the A players, I want to get the C and the B players to promote this podcast and get it out there. I want to utilize all my friends, family, and every single audience member I have to push them towards the subscribe rate review model so that I can get the couple hundred 5-star reviews. Because when was the last time you reviewed podcasts? Like, I've reviewed like 2 podcasts in my entire life. It's just not something I do. I listen to them and I'm like, this is amazing. And no one would ever know. So I have a couple hundred reviews. People are like, dang, how many people must have gone through that? Because most people don't work hard at this. That it builds the credibility. Then you get the A players. When you get the A players and you have the credibility, you get more of the A players. And the last little bit of that is when you create the small clips, whether it's you do a Zoom interview or an in-person interview or even an audio, you want to create them in a way that's beneficial to these people that you're interviewing, not about you. So don't clip the first 30 seconds of it, you asking a question or you commentating on something. Make it very all about them and as minimal about you and all about their branding and their look or something in the middle rather than about your own. Because everyone thinks, oh, it's my podcast, they need to tag me in it. No, like Grant Cardone has gotten us over 1 million views because we created something that was something that he liked, that he's like, oh, can we post this? And they utilize the content. And then, of course, hundreds of people are tagging me because that's my podcast. Yet I didn't care if he tagged me or anything. So I made it about them. So utilize those skills. They're super underrated. Make it about them, not about your show.
Yeah, that's actually something that we heard earlier on today with one of our previous guests is about like, you want to create a digital asset for these people. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to share what you've done on their page. You know, they're not going to post some template that looks good with your brand on their Instagram. But if you create it to be a digital asset for them, then they're much more likely to post it and to share your content. So that's a really great tip. I'm learning a lot by listening to you. So the third question for you is, how have you converted the people that find your show and come to it just casually into fans? How do you keep the same people coming back to listen to your show?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I take them off the show and I don't just take them to an opt-in, though I've done it. I don't just take them to a paid product, though I've done it. One of the big things is on social. I try to utilize what social platform are people already on and how can I connect them together, which for me is Facebook. So what I did is I created a Facebook group, and my call to action always is just open up Facebook, type in the $1 Billion Brotherhood, request to join, and let us know you came from the podcast. Number one, I'm able to see right away who came from the podcast, which means they're super hot leads because they've been listening to me with earbuds in for however long. So you're able to call them, get them more connected. The best fans are the ones that invest 100% of the time. The second thing is now they're in a community where now they can see more stuff about, we have their phone number at this point. We have their email at this point. They're inside of the group. Inside of my group, they can actually get my physical book for free. And I cover the shipping and everything. So compensation drives behavior. I literally don't make them pay for even a cent. They don't even have to put in their name. I just need their address. And if they watch 5 videos that show them how to be a part of the group and be a good group member, they get the physical book for free. So all of that's a nurture process. And during that, they subscribe, they review, they put on push notifications, they put on notifications on every platform so that they're able to see and have me cut through the noise of everyone else's stuff, because I'm just showing up more often than everyone else. So I've utilized taking them off the platform so that I can reach them on all the platforms that they're on about what's going on with the podcast, get them reintroduced, and make sure I'm not just waiting for them to open their podcast app.
I think there are so many, again, interesting things to unpack there. The fact that you're literally sending them a book, it's you're escalating them to continue to receive more and more value from you. So if you like the podcast, join the group. If you like the group, here's my book. If you like my book, and then all the while they're still listening to your podcast and they're still competing and participating and conversating in the group. So as they're escalating to additional levels of service from you, they're still enjoying all of your front end offers at the same time, which is really just such a smart way to get people invested in the content you're doing. And obviously it only works because your episodes of your podcast and the book are good.
Yeah.
But our fourth question for you, and you've shared so many creative things. I'm curious to see what you have left to share, but I'm sure you do. Is if you could start your show over again and knowing what you know now from the years of experience and all the things you've learned and the strategies you've applied, what would you do differently at the start to have grown more effectively from the very beginning?
Yeah, I would have definitely branded myself and the show a little bit more generally, and that way that I could use it for anything I do in the future. You know, BDB is awesome because it's very specific to our company, and we wanted it to be very well known from the group to our company to our programs to our events, and that way people didn't get confused. And I believe that that's cool. Yet I think I would have just stuck with something that was a little bit more either niche down to the subject I want to talk about, but not just niche down to the company. So I love talking about business in general. And I wish I had something that was a little bit more branded around me. So I'm like, all right, I'm never going to shift this ever in my life. And no matter what company I do in the world, this is going to help support that. And I put too much emphasis on it needs to be the same name as my company so that everyone doesn't get confused and say, are you this guy or are you this guy? So that's one of the things I would have done. And I would have gone all in and really focused on all platforms right away and production value. Right now, the same person who built Joe Rogan's podcast studio is actually building this whole studio. It'll be done in January. And so we'll have like 4 camera angles from the ceiling with custom lighting and hue lighting and all this crazy stuff. And I really wish that I would have just done that right off the bat, production value, and gone all in with making sure I had the right editors and, you know, I have an editing team. I own a podcast post-production company, YouTube SEO post-production company now. And so just so I could do that for my stuff. I wish I would have done that earlier rather than kind of tiptoeing into it. Oh, I'm going to do audio and then, you know, oh, maybe get one camera or whatever. Like I would have done everything that I could to be able to up the production value right away.
That's incredible. That's awesome. So the last question for you is, I don't know if you do paid advertising or not, but let's say the Lewis and Kyle show granted you $1,000 free of charge creative marketing budget. How would you use that money to bring listeners to your show in any way that you can think of?
Totally. So there's a few different ways that I would do this. Number one is quality listeners is better than quantity listeners, always. And so one of the ways that I could do that is, again, I could put that $1,000 towards giving my book away for free or other things that would be attractive to people that would listen to the podcast. And I would lead them to that group and then I'd push them to the podcast. That's something totally different. The other way that I would do it that's more podcast specific advertising is 2 different ways. Number one is I would use the money to get people to listen to the episode in the most frequently listened to hours right before those hours. Because what happens is if your podcast starts getting downloads right before 7 a.m. or whatever the peak times are, you start ranking higher on the charts. So people are easily able to find you if they're looking for a new podcast. So I use the money strategically at those times to get people to download and subscribe right before the peak hours when everyone's searching. The other thing that I think is something more creative is I would take the video if you have Zoom, which hopefully everyone's recording on Zoom, but not everyone uses the audio. Let's say me and Grant Cardone, we wrap it out and we have a good podcast interview. Well, he's got a good audience. So I could literally go on Instagram, and if I want to run the ad through Instagram, I can do it for profile visits if I want them to come check my stuff out, or I could run it through the Facebook advertising platform still to his audience. And I would take clips of that. I would either B-roll it before his YouTube videos and run YouTube ads. And so that every video that people are consuming of Grant Cardone, it's advertising the podcast that I did with Grant Cardone. Or I would take that small Instagram clip and I'd run it to Grant Cardone's audience as well and get them over and become my audience through the association. Because when you interview someone amazing, people automatically just think you guys are on the same level. That's what's cool about getting high level people on your podcast or on your stages, is that they start looking at you the same exact way. You get the same credibility as them because it's your show.
Well, that's 3 really creative strategies that I think someone with a paid budget should really consider trying in the context of their show. But this was a really educational and interesting and thought-provoking summit. So thank you so much for coming on. And I'm excited to see your studio in a couple months. That's really cool.
Dude, it's going to be sick. I'm excited too.
Yeah. So if people found your answers to these questions interesting and want to learn more about yourself and your business and your podcast, what's the call to action for the listeners of this summit?
Yeah. So I have my book for free, which they can go grab, which I said like a million times, which is at nicholasbayerle.com/ebook and Nicholas Bayerle on Instagram. Send me a message. If they have any questions about more in-depth things of what we do, I'm an open book. I don't mind. I would love to be able to share it. We've done all of those things that we just talked about. So we're practitioners first before we're teachers, and I would love to be able to help.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for watching this interview. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to our channel right here on YouTube. And if you feel like you learned something, share this episode on social media to help us grow our audience as well.